Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into how America's rapid westward growth basically pushed a deeply divided nation straight toward an unavoidable civil war. I'm so thrilled you're joining me today because honestly, this topic is just fascinating. When we think about America expanding westward, we usually picture wagon trails and pioneers, right? But the reality was far more tense. It was literally a political ticking time bomb. So today, we're going to unpack exactly how the simple act of adding new land to the map turned into an explosive, all-out struggle over human freedom and political dominance.
Here is our quick roadmap for today. We'll be looking at 1. A house divided, 2. The balance of power, 3. The rise of sectionalism, 4. Flashpoints of expansion, and finally, 5. Morality, education, and peace.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, a house divided.
Think about the mood of the United States in the 1800s. To really get it, we have to look at this famous biblical verse from Mark 3:25. As America acquired new land, whether that was through the Louisiana Purchase, the annexation of Texas, or the Mexican-American War, every single new piece of territory forced Americans to make a tough choice. They had to decide on the future of slavery for that specific territory. You couldn't just, add land. You had to declare exactly what kind of society that land would hold. This constant, unavoidable decision was splitting the national house right down the middle, and it made things incredibly unstable.
And that leads us perfectly into Section 2, the balance of power.
Now, to truly understand why adding new land caused so much chaos, we have to look at the mechanics of political power. I want you to focus on the number 2. This single number is literally the key to everything here. See, every time a new state joined the Union, regardless of how huge it was geographically or how many people lived there, it received exactly 2 senators in the United States Congress. More slave states meant more votes to protect slavery, while more free states meant more votes to restrict it.
So, why was this mathematical balance in Congress absolutely crucial to both sides? Well, maintaining an equal number of free and slave states was the only way either side could prevent the other from taking total control over national laws. Simply put, neither side could afford to let the other pull ahead in the Senate.
The stakes were astronomical. Expansion made this debate incredibly intense because each new territory was seen as an existential threat. We're not just talking about farming or real estate here. Winning a state tipped the political balance and completely shifted control over national laws. Ultimately, moving the country's borders was directly tied to the expansion or the restriction of human freedom. For the politicians back then, winning a state meant protecting your region's entire way of life. Losing it, that meant losing your power entirely.
All right, Section 3, the rise of sectionalism. As this fight over congressional power dragged on, a totally new mindset took hold. It was called sectionalism. Make sure you remember this concept because it's a fierce loyalty to your own region rather than to the country as a whole. Because of the endless battles over new states, by the time we hit the 1850s, people increasingly saw themselves as Northerners or Southerners first and Americans second. The shared national identity was seriously fracturing.
The root of this divide really came down to 2 completely different economic and social systems trying to coexist. On one hand, you had the North, heavily focused on manufacturing, industry, and free labor. On the other, you had the South, which relied deeply on agriculture and slave labor to keep its economy afloat. They were basically functioning as 2 completely separate worlds trying to share one map.
And you better believe that economic and social divide bled straight into politics. A perfect example of sectional loyalty in action is what happened on the floor of Congress. Compromise? That basically went out the window. Instead, lawmakers voted strictly along north-south lines just to protect their specific region's interests. Every single vote became a massive regional battle. This constant political deadlock created immense frustration, and it just kept pushing the nation closer and closer to secession and war.
Let's move to Section 4, Flashpoints of Expansion.
So we can see this tension escalating over a few crucial decades. This wasn't an overnight explosion. It was a series of flashpoints that slowly but surely eroded trust between the North and the South, starting with the Missouri Compromise in 1820 and leading right up to the deeply divided 1850s. Let's look a bit closer at that first major milestone. In 1820, the Missouri Compromise was basically designed to maintain that delicate balance of power we talked about earlier. To keep things perfectly equal, they admitted Maine as a free state and Missouri as a slave state. Then they drew a permanent mathematical line, the 36° 30 latitude line, straight across the Louisiana Territory. The rule was, slavery is banned north of this line and allowed south of it. It was meant to be a long-term solution, but really, it was just a geographical band-aid that delayed the inevitable clash.
Fast forward to 1845, and we hit another massive flashpoint. Texas joins the United States as a slave state, and it completely shatters that delicate balance, tipping power directly toward the South. This also cranked up tensions with Mexico, leading to the Mexican-American War. Now, while Southerners were celebrating adding Texas, Northerners were getting deeply worried. They actually started to fear a broader slave power conspiracy, this belief that there was an intentional, highly organized effort to expand and protect slavery at the expense of freedom. You can imagine, this mistrust deepened the sectional divide immensely.
Underneath all the political maneuvering over land and Senate seats, there was a profound clash of visions over the moral direction of the entire country. Supporters of the Southern vision believed that slavery was absolutely essential to their prosperity and way of life, and that it literally needed to expand Western to protect their economic systems. The Northern vision, conversely, saw slavery as wrong. They believed that if they could just keep it from expanding, it would eventually die out on its own, allowing America to finally live up to its founding ideals of liberty and equality.
So it really boiled down to this one massive question. Would the United States be defined by human freedom or by preserving an institution that actively denied it? It wasn't just a disagreement about where to draw state borders or agricultural tariffs. It was a struggle over the nation's very soul. And this fundamental conflict of identity is really what made the coming of the Civil War almost unavoidable.
Which brings us to our final part today, Section 5, Morality, Education, and Peace. Now, the source material we're looking at today from the HeroesMart Academy Godly Learners series uses this specific history to present a very distinct philosophy. The curriculum argues that education, when intertwined with biblical morality, is essential. From their perspective, the politicians of the 1800s were brilliant, highly educated men who crafted these complex compromises and debated constitutional law with incredible intelligence. Yet, according to the source, because they lacked a unified moral grounding, all their smart choices still led a nation straight into its deadliest war.
To support this idea, the curriculum points to Romans 8, verse 6, which speaks to finding life and peace through a spiritual mind. The source contrasts this biblical promise of peace with the absolute destruction caused by the divided, sectionally loyal minds of the 1850s. The takeaway they're presenting is that relying solely on human cleverness leads to conflict, whereas being spiritually minded brings true life and peace.
As we wrap up this explainer, the source material leaves us with a really provocative question to think about. You are acquiring knowledge every single day, learning the what, why, and how of the world around you. But how are you going to apply it? Will you allow your education to be guided by a moral compass, ensuring that the choices you make in your own life bring peace and unity rather than division and conflict? It's something we all need to consider. Thank you so much for exploring this material with me today. Keep seeking knowledge, keep seeking wisdom, and I'll see you in the next explainer.